Please put your hands together for Mr. Emeka Mba, who makes the speech. Panel on what you see. What are they read for there?
Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning. Let me thank Charles and FILMIC for inviting me to share some of my perspectives about digital broadcasting, fame, entertainment, and all the rest. This talk is in two parts. The first part, I came out of the first part. First part, really, Charles said to talk about the digital transition and its impact in the industry. But over the years, I've been talking about that, and I kind of realized that people have this misconception about what digital really means. So I had to go back and do the first part. And so you're going to listen to the first part, which is slightly academic to some extent. But then the second part it's a very practical presentation, just talks about what digital is in terms of Nigerian broadcasting and some of the steps that we took at that point in time. As you all know, I'm no longer at the Broadcasting Commission, so, but the presentation of the second part clearly has information in relation to that, my time at the Commission. So can we move to the next slide? So this box, we all know what this box is. This is used to be our traditional box, or TV box. Next, I hate to do this next thing, but the reality is that television is out of the box. So television's on our phones and everywhere, really. Go back. No, don't run too fast. Go back to the, yeah. And so, because of digital and internet, so many things have changed, and things will continue to change, really. And so we're in the era where, as Clay Shirky said, he's a writer, talks about innovation and so on, teaches at Harvard. He had this notion, what they call the end of scarcity. And he said, because really with digital, the notion of scarcity is gone. To a large extent, it's gone. That every one of us here can be broadcaster today if we want, have our own YouTube channel, do stuff. Every one of us here can become a filmmaker because we've got iPhones, we've got all kinds of phones in our hands. We can edit. So that notion, from an analog perspective, where you had to go to the NBC to get a license, you had to do this, you had to do that. There was only so much frequency left in Lagos, so what are you going to do? But now you can jump over all those hoops. So, and he goes on to say that really, even though scarcity had its own issues, but the notion of abundance is really a challenge in terms of how we think about it, whether we as filmmakers, whether we as producers, as government people, as creators, that abundance is even a bigger problem. How do we, so effectively, when we sat at NBC, or even when I sat at the Film and Video Censors Board, we had this crazy notion, I often shared it, where we said, oh, you can't take Nigerian films without it being censored, and we try to regulate the export or the external distribution of films. And it was such a stupid thing. Because you could put the entire library of everyone who's a filmmaker on a flash drive and carry it to London and print, and we saw it in Singapore where Jennifer's Diary then was being mass produced. And so you find that how we think in this industry is extremely important. And I said, this is pre-academic, but it's just so that when we think about certain things in our own industry, we think about it from the point of abundance. Whether you're like the IMAX, you own the theaters, whether you're a producer, think from a perspective of abundance. What does it mean to competition, to the networks of relationship where you have? Don't think from a perspective of scarcity, and I'll tell you why. Next slide. So this slide I'm going to talk about digital disruption and the battle for relevance. Again, slightly academic, but I'll tell you in relation to what it means in reality. Go on. So we found that anything that can be disrupted will be disrupted by digital. Literally anything. Anything that goes through a digital value chain will be disrupted. Whether it's creation of content, distribution of content, sharing of content, whatever it is, will be disrupted. And that's the fundamental reality that all of us need to come to grips with. Next. And then here we find it. Content, technology, new businesses, all kinds of things are coming into play. And so, and how we monetize content. Everything is changing. And our own industry, because fundamentally, we wouldn't have Nollywood if it wasn't for digital, if it wasn't for technology. So you've got to understand that perhaps no other industry is affected the way media and technology is. We are not just at the point of production, we are at the point of distribution and sharing, more than anything else. So that's the reality. The other thing is that, you know, we're in this constant battle between traditional media and new media. Next slide. Just go on. And so we begin to find new products, new services coming into play. But again, we find that as more and more content that you find in the market, you begin to find that context or relevance is becoming more important. And indeed, it is content and relevance that made Nollywood such a popular thing in the first place, at least outside of Nigeria. To people in Uganda, Botswana, Rwanda, it was relevant. Hollywood may have had its glitz and glamour, but there was something about Nollywood and the way we made our films which made it very relevant to them. Next. So all of this is happening, but because digital, and I'll tell you this, digital is pretty much, or the notion of digital technology is like, it's like fighting Boko Haram. They don't wear a uniform. They're not in one place. They will come at you at night, in the morning, when you're in the bathroom. There's no way you can cage digital. But the reality also is that how digital or how technology disrupt things, you know, it kind of ebbs and flows and is dependent on the following factors. Go on. Again, broadband, digital, media, all of these things, as far as media is concerned, is the speed at which people innovate and how things happen in industry. Whether you find that tomorrow MTN can buy a certain business which you thought was not traditional. I remember when we did the licensing of MTN, other people were saying, but MTN is a cell phone company, how come, what are they doing in media? But the reality is that that's anything, once you're in that digital pipeline, you're there. There's no coming back from it, really. And so you have a company that used to sell content in little envelopes, red envelopes. Suddenly, they're one of the biggest media companies, streaming companies. You had a cell phone company called AT&T, and now they're one of the biggest media companies. And that's the notion. So I thought I'd share this before we begin to go into the practical, what is NBC doing, what is the Nigerian government doing, and all of that. But if we don't understand the dynamics, the essence of what is going on, as far as it from a philosophical point of view, because you hear these things every day, and to most of us in this room, I'm pretty much, I'm like a fellow priest, preaching to a congregation of priests. But I just want to do it from my own nuanced understanding. Next. So we get to the point where, with all this content swimming about, with everything that's happening, we begin to see that capital, intellectual capital, is becoming more important. But we also need to do something about it. We need to promote it. We need to find ways in which we promote, and I'll come to that a little bit later. But let me share a classical pictograph that kind of illustrates what I mean by digital disruption. Go on. So here you are. You're a tank commander in the old analog year before digital disruption. So when competition is happening, it's tank for tank. Go on. That's a typical fight in an analog before digital disruption. So it is you against like for like. That's what it is. But when disruption happens, go on. I'll show you what it means. I think it's Yibo's joke. So here you go. I was going to say something silly, thank God. So here you are. You're the tank. And go on. But digital, you're now facing not just a column of tanks, but supported by an air force. Go on. Warthogs, missiles, ship-to-shore missiles, fellow tanks, submarines. That's the reality of digital. That's the reality of, so if you sit here and think, oh, because my business is IMAX, I have cinema, but YouTube is a huge competition. Netflix is huge competition because look at it this way. So someone says, I think it was Jason that said something. Someone asked him, "Oh, why don't you have live sports on your Roku?" And he said, "Never, because of the cost." But he's thinking about it from the perspective of going to get European Champions League and EPL. What about beach volleyball down here on Oniru Beach? Okay, what about table tennis in Yaba versus Mushi? What about boxing between Makoko boys versus? He's just thinking about it from a traditional perspective. He needs to step out and think about it in this context. So for those of us who, again, this is our industry, but our industry is fundamentally digital. And digital is not linear. Remember, digital is pretty much an insurgent. So go on, next. So you hear the big fight today is around, because that's really the only way you're going to monetize better in a digital marketplace is through something we call platforms. So if you are in the business where you look at it and you say, what? Is my business a platform or am I part of a platform? If your business is a platform, fantastic. Because platforms it's really a business model, as I said, by definition, that bring multiple sides in a given market and attracts customers, suppliers, and everyone together, and everyone is exchanging value. That's the beauty of a platform. In any other market, pre-analog or before digital, you didn't have platforms as such. Okay? You had value chains. So I go to where they're selling bitter cola, I buy it. I go to a processing plant and they process it and I turn it into, so from raw material to goods and services. But in this space, as you can see from your Ubers and your Airbnbs and your Netflixes and so on and so forth, their business is fundamentally different because it's based on an ecosystem. Okay, so, and that's, again, let's understand that, because if you are trying to, and the reason like I said earlier on, when we were trying to put together digital, and everybody was thinking that digital is, I simply put on a transmitter. I used to hear that, oh, once we put transmitter, we'll go digital. You hear some state governments, we bought 20 digital transmitters, we're digital. And I laughed. But I couldn't convince them easily, because you make more money selling transmitters. I'm not a contractor, so, but the contractual, the businesses where, you know what I'm trying to say. But to tell them that you need to spend more time building this, because this at inception is very theoretical. How do you build a digital ecosystem? With content, with technology and platforms, and start thinking, all of that takes time, it takes rigor, it takes some degree of planning and coordination. So it's very easy just to go into a market with $100,000 or $1 million and you buy a transmitter and you can say, I've gone digital. But you cannot really give value without these things being. I'm not saying that because you can find that technology is very important. Yeah? But content sits at the food chain. And I'll tell you that, and I'll explain that in subsequent slides. Next. So, I've shared this a lot because people often ask, so what's happening in the future? What's going to happen in the future? And we're beginning to see it now. The future is now. You're finding in Nollywood, for example, a lot of the movies you find are movies that do very well. They draw on social media impact. Your social media influencers, your name those characters, Sanus, yes, exactly. They've got 500,000, yeah, 1 million followers, and so on and so forth. So, and how you market them. So social media is has a huge impact. Not just now, but that impact will actually accelerate in the future. But there's something that's fundamental, because people keep saying, once you go digital, linear TV will die. It's not going anywhere soon. In fact, if it's going anywhere, the direction in which it's going is that it comes from a position of strength. So brands rule. So if you're transitioning your business from analog to digital, and I was asked to speak on analog to digital, not just from the perspective of broadcasting, but from a business model perspective, brands. You have to look at your business. How do I create a brand? Because in a digital space, the currency, the value is brand. In fact, you will hear that the more you go into the business, the marketplace, and start to do trading and talking about mergers and acquisition, there's a brand value. And so, if you're going to do anything, look at how you're going to build on that. As I said, linear TV, they've got this huge. Imagine if NTA were to get its act together. It would be a miracle, but just imagine if that were to be possible. But that brand recognition that it has for many years, imagine what it could do. And so brands will rule, whether there be old brands or new brands or brands to come. But anything that really establishes itself as a brand will rule. And then there's other thing that we often take for granted in this part of the world, which is data. People just say, Emeka, how many children you get? About 4. How can you be about 4? It's only 2, 3, or 4. You can't, but that's a very African thing. That's we kind of built into our consciousness. It's like, if you tell them the exact number, something might happen. So we've driven that all the way into how we do business. People are very scared to share data with you. But in the world we live in, and in the world, that world is a world that is increasingly going to be driven by data. So let's get that into our heads in terms of how we compose ourselves, plan our businesses, and move forward. And we see that in terms of what Netflix is doing. They had that crazy movie with I think it was called Bright? Will Smith. And everybody talked about, how it was not a good movie. But do you know how many people, again, that's a conversation around screen to stream. How many people streamed that movie the first day? And do you know when our sister Genevieve had a movie out and again, 2 things happened on the night of its premiere. Social media, everybody was sharing, I shared, everybody was sharing it, and more people who shared it, more people who wanted to see it. And of course, Netflix skips numbers, so everybody was seeing it. And if there's talk about more for her to do, and obviously there's more for her to do with that, it's because of what happened, because of that bottom part, numbers, data. They could harvest data, they could see, they could tell exactly what kinds of movies. In fact, at what point in time did people pause it to go to the bathroom, or pause it to go and come back, and for how long, how many times you saw it, and so on and so forth. So that is something that we need to work on in terms of how we prepare ourselves for digital. And then the other thing that also works with digital very well, works with data very well, is subscription. Subscription TV, subscription in terms of, because there's a chat that I always, but it's, again, I didn't want to put it here, but the more you go digital, the more subscription comes into play. That is, the more you pay. Because digital means that the more you go digital, the more you interact, the more you stop. So the only way for that to happen is there's data within the business model, and then there is some kind of interactivity and connectivity. So if that's the case, then subscription will dominate the business. So whether we look at it, and I'm very impressed with the attempts that you guys try to do with your VOD platform. But that's that conversation around how you can tweak that, how you can make that even much more relevant. So that's, guys, so this is really what I find to be the four key things that are going to impact on content. And to be honest, the more I talk about it, the more I remove the notion of whether it's broadcasting, whether it's frame, whether it's TV, and I talk about content. Because content doesn't live on a box anymore. It just lives. Of course, again, things that will impact it: consumer choices, disruption, regulatory dynamics. So if your regulator doesn't understand these things, of course, that regulator might be, what's that classic line in the movie? It's like an immovable force and something running at, I can't remember what movie was it. You run into something that is coming with great speed and something that cannot be moved.
An unstoppable force
hits and moves. Yes, that's it. So regulators are very important in terms of the future direction of a business. All those things are important, but that's also, regulatory dynamics are also very important in terms of mergers and acquisition and so on and so forth. So if you have an analog mentality regulating a digital industry, there'll be problems. Next. Okay, so I'm just going to run through this in 2 minutes. Go on, just flood each slide and we just talk through it in 30 seconds. So these are just some of the buzzwords, and we see that it's happening more and more. Not a lot of people even know that HBO made Game of Thrones, but everybody talked about Game of Thrones because that's what it was. That's how we watch TV these days. It's that same again in terms of conversation around how people consume content. Next. Again, it's all about brands, and this is about competition. So, if you think that Google is not your competition, or Coca-Cola is not your competition, or Red Bull is not your competition, think again. If you cast your mind back to digital disruption in the age of competition, in the age of digital disruption, be prepared. Next. Again, when I talk about, because Amazon is a quintessential digital business. I mean, if you think about when it came to be, 1995, 96, came out just around the cusp of digital. And the lessons really, it's important for us to think about it, because no matter what business, this guy started selling books. This guy now owns a film studio. This guy owns the biggest cloud service company in the world. So to think about it is really makes stuff, not just makes phones, makes readers and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that important to understand how. This slide is available to share later on. But this point is important, that digital is fundamentally evolutionary. By that I mean that digital is not, because tomorrow there's 5G coming. Imagine what that means. America and China almost went to war over 5G, literally. because they know that it changes the game. If you think that internet changed the game then, 5G is, some call it technology's master. Not another technology, but the master technology, because what it could do, we need to go back and read Isaac Asimov's books to be able to understand, or H.G. Wells, to understand what technology, what that 5G could do. So these are some of the catchphrases, and this is the first one in terms of my 7 fundamental things about technology. It is content, not technology. It is content. And the reality is, the more you invest in content, the more the value of content grows. Whether it be on an individual level as a business, or whether it be as an entity, whether it be as an industry. So people always say, oh, Nollywood, the content is not very good. Who cares? Just keep making more content. Because with digital, we're in the business of the long tail. Somebody will like it, even if it's trash. So let nobody tell you, oh, your content is not world standard. There's nothing like world standard anymore. There's a standard of the marketplace, really. The standard to which people will pay. So I pretty much think that everyone understands what the digital switchover is, really. So next. So when this was designed, when we did the framework for this thing, we had 3 basic propositions in terms of the targets. We had obviously the consumer side, you and I sitting at home. We wanted to give them better pictures, lots of free channels, and an information service as well on the box as well. And then for the industry, the reality is, and I'll share that in a second. I think I've shared that. Charles knows of that. The dysfunctional advertising market, because you cannot have a functioning, sustainable TV industry with advertising the way we have advertising in Nigeria. Because again, data is missing through the boxes, and typically this was the look and feel that we were looking for. And so essentially it will be a distribution channel for Nollywood, straight to the consumer as well. So at some point, so you now see the competition to Moses, yeah? That this could have been, because if there's 20 million people and 2 million people sign up, oh, I'm interested in watching this movie. How will that impact your business tomorrow? And you're going around saying, oh, people come to the cinema. And then suddenly, 2 million people across Nigeria saying, nah, I'm not, watch it at home. There's too much crime. There's sheiks demonstrating somewhere. There's soldiers shooting. Man, I watch it at home. And then the whole game changes. And then because the box was a connected box, when it was designed, it had connectivity in mind, so that the box actually becomes a gateway to the home. You could have Wi-Fi, and this is basically a free box, a government subsidized box. And the wonderful thing about it was that it allowed for third-party app development. So you can actually program certain apps that will sit on this environment as well. Because again, remember what we talked about. What we talked about, ecosystems and platforms. So this was the idea, that we needed to create an ecosystem with a platform in play. So, as I said, this is a bit jaded and dated, but the important thing is, at some point, before I left, we had placed an order for 1 million set-top boxes for the initial launch, and had paid for them, and we had in play the total, the cost of it would be 1,500, which included what we call a digital access fee. And that access fee is something that from there you get a content fund. We built in such a way that, similar, almost like a BBC TV license, but people pay that annually. It's about 1,000 naira. I think that most Nigerians can afford to pay for that. But so it was well, people who bought it then, I suppose, bought it for I wasn't there at the time when boxes were being sold, but this was the base price, and it was etched on the box so that we wanted to prevent people from skiving other people. So the hope was that we'll create the largest free-to-air digital platform in the world. Hopefully it will happen, but it's so many roadblocks along that way. And we had at that point calculated, made a baseline of what we thought we could get in terms of when you did that in the ad market. We looked about that will increase the advertising market, and Nollywood we average. Now these were educated guesstimates at best, but it was what we worked with at that time. So here is the thing, and people always ask me, where is this horrible content on free-to-air television? This is the reason. So if you don't have measurement, the value that you people place on the audience is 0 to nothing. So I can put church programming anytime, I can put anything, because I don't value you. You're not worth anything to me, really. Yeah? And if that's the case, there'll be low advertising revenue, as is the case. And if that's the case, TV platforms or channels will not have money to invest in original programming. And so they will just keep selling their airtime. And obviously, again, the cycle continues. So the point is, how do we break the cycle? And we thought the best thing to do was to break it at the point of measurement. Next slide. And so this is the really scary thing. This scared me in 2014 when we had this, when we asked this company to do this research for us. And we found out that GDP, advertising to GDP ratio for Nigeria, if you look at that bottom there, as at 2012, this data we put together from 2012, even though it was published 2014, but it was 0.04 to our GDP. Look at Ghana, which is why when you go to Ghana, you see more advertising, even though the TV market is smaller, but there's more advertising activity, there's more revenues compared to their GDP. Multi-movies. I can even break it down and say movies with handkerchiefs shown. I can even break it down and say give me 10 movies, 10 best African movies. That's the play of data. And that's me choosing, that's what's relevant to me. So it's not like in the world where you and I grew up. Some people are older than me, I'm older than some. I see all that. Maybe just 2 years, all this background, just 2 years. But we see a world where we only had NTA. That's what we had. We couldn't do anything. We came back from school at 4, you watched it, you like, don't watch it, that's what was there. But if you have kids now, you tell them, go to your room, no TV. What does that mean? It's absolutely nothing. Actually, it's better for them to be with you downstairs so you can see. If you tell them go to their room, she's on the phone, she's on an iPad. And they can have, I discovered my daughter has 3 phones. Because every time I discard one, I'm not using it again, she just takes it. I am thinking she has one, and there's Wi-Fi at home. So even if there's no SIM card on it, there's Wi-Fi. So, and she's only watching what is relevant to her. And so for us in this room, again, the other thing is, the last point is, anything you make in this world where there's content everywhere, if it's not entertaining, if it's not catchy, you have no other opportunity to, because I see it all the time, one of the media things is to inform and educate. And let's do things to educate people. Pardon my French. You're not going to go past the gate if it's not catchy. I can watch Wedding Party anytime, any day, because it's entertaining. And so you can slip in things there that will inform, perhaps educate me. But if you just wanted to show me, like I had this conversation with a friend of mine, she said, oh, they're having this conversation with NBC and Ministry of Health about making movies, how to do something so that people will not be smoking in movies. I'm like, hello? People who generally smoke in movies are seen as bad guy, or they have a problem. And so even there it's written that it is for context. So all I have to do is contextualize it, and context is everlasting. So you cannot win. And that's the thing, you need to put your money where your mouth is. So if you say, oh, smoking is a problem, why don't you come to one or three producers and talk about how somebody's smoking and trying to light a cigarette and accidentally the thing burns him and he crashes the car. You've sold. There's nothing else. Why are you trying to tell me don't smoke weed? By the way, thank you guys.
Let's hear it from Mr. Emeka Mba. Oh, God. Thank you very much for the erudite, brilliant, fantastic presentation. And I'm sure these are some of the discussions we've been having over the weeks. Monetize your content, the importance of your content, standards of your content, and the audience for your content.